Well, this bald cypress that we planted last fall is doing quite well, and this brings up the fact that for Oklahoma, fall planting time for trees and shrubs is probably the best time. Now, there are several reasons for this, but the foremost reason is because the trees and shrubs have time to get their roots established before they have to go through that hot summer. Whereas if you plant them in the spring, they don't have all that time. Now also, as the temperatures start to decrease, the pests and diseases start to decrease, and so you won't have that competition going on too. It's also a good time for us to plant trees because we're not quite as busy. Things are pretty harried in the spring, but as things slow down in the fall, we have time to plant our trees and shrubs. There's also, with the cooler temperatures, less water use, so there's less of a chance of them drying out on you. Also, when you're out shopping for trees, your nursery and landscape professionals have more time to visit with you because they're not as rushed as they are in the spring. Well, finally, it's a good chance to take advantage of some of the really good specials that are on trees and shrubs right now. But there are a few things that you'll want to look for before buying them because they've been sitting out and people may have been going through them. Well, first off, you want to look for a tree that has a balance in the top. You want to find one that has good branching structure all the way around. Don't get a tree that has branches on one side, but it's pretty much straight up and down on the other. Also, you want to make sure that the leaves on it are spread out up and down the trunk. Don't get one with a few leaves up in the very top part, but because for a young tree, it needs to have them spread out. Now, if you don't want those branches on there later, you can go ahead and prune them off after it's gotten established. But right at first, it's important to have those leaves and branches spread out. You'll also want to find one that doesn't have a lot of crossing branches. That way it'll be starting out better. You'll have to do less pruning. And if you can find one, try to get them where they're not broken off. Sometimes they've been bumped around a little and you'll have several branches that are broken. So go through and try and find them that aren't like that. Now, if it's an actual tree that has a central leader habit like this one does, this bald cypress, then you want to get one like that. Now, we've got one here that we've got multi-trunks on. Now, for some trees and shrubs, that's great, but that's not the growth habit of this, so you're going to want to stick with one that has that one main leader on it. Now, looking down here at the bottom, there are several things that you can look for in the pot, and it's actually a good idea to knock these out of the pot if you can. Now, if you look at the top, one of the main things you're going to want to look for is spiraling roots, because this means that it's in too small of a pot. And actually, when the roots start to spiral, that's not good. And I'll show you here what I'm talking about. If we lift this out of the pot, you can see how the roots are starting to spiral around, and also on the bottom they've done this here. Now, if they're not spiraling too much, you can actually spread these roots out when you plant, and you can take care of that. However, when they reach this stage, when they're really woody and they're spiraling, these will continue to spiral around and can actually girdle the tree after several years because they will continue to grow in a circle even after you plant them, and they'll strangle that tree at the base. Now here I've got a really good example of spiraling roots in this pot. Here you'll notice you can actually even see them on the top. Now it is a good idea to knock the tree out of the pot and check and make sure, because it's not always this obvious. Now this is a giveaway. We don't want to buy this tree. Now the other thing about this tree, in addition to having several leaders here, also you want to get a tree that is about the right size for the pot it's in. Like this, it's a nice tree, but it's in a pretty much the right size pot. Whereas this, when you first look at it, it doesn't look very tall, but where you see it's been broken off, and it's actually got quite a large caliper trunk on it, it's an indicator that this tree has actually been in this pot a long time, and so the roots will be very root bound, and it won't be a correctable problem. Now, other things that you can look for in the pot, here, try to get one that actually has the soil up to about 1 inch from the top, because you're actually buying, say here, you're buying a 1 gallon pot here. But if it's only half full of soil, you don't have 1 gallon's worth of root growth in there. So if the soil is way down here, you have a smaller tree than what you think. Also, when you're knocking them out of the pot, you want to check for good root growth out to the edges all the way around. Now you'll notice here that I've got root growth on this side, but when I turn it around, I don't have much root growth over here. It's pretty much just soil. Now this can be an indicator that this pot was sitting out, the sun was shining on it, and those roots never got to grow into that area. And if you'll notice when looking at the top of this tree, you can see that it's developing a problem here. And so that won't be one that we want to get. Now sometimes that problem hasn't shown up yet, and so that's why we want to knock them out of the pot and make sure we've got good root growth all the way around. Now for balled and burlap trees, they will probably be more available after the first frost through Thanksgiving. But for the container trees, you can be planting them from now through about Thanksgiving. Now there are a few things to look for with balled and burlap trees. Now the first thing is to check and make sure that the tree is firm in the root ball. If you can move that tree around inside that root ball and you feel the root ball and it feels very loose, then don't buy that one because you want it to be very firm. Now also, if you can, which sometimes you can, but try and look and see if it's got large roots. If you've only got large roots in that root ball, it means that it wasn't root pruned, and so there aren't any smaller roots in there. But you can sometimes feel those in there. If you feel both large and small roots, then that means it's a good tree. And finally, the size of the root ball. A good rule of thumb is to have a root ball for every inch of diameter of caliper of the tree. You're going to want to have 10 to 12 inches of root ball. So if you have a 1-inch tree, you want a 10 to 12 inch root ball there. And that's going to be enough to help that tree get established. Well, one of the final reasons that it's good to buy trees in the fall is for that great fall color. And it's a wonderful time to select for that. Now there are some trees that do very well here in Oklahoma for fall color, and some of those include the Chinese pistache, which has the orange to sometimes a purplish color in the fall. If you're looking for more of the orange to red color, the Caddo sugar maple is a very good tree, and red color, the Shumard oak will be a very good tree. For a smaller tree with some reddish to almost yellow color is the amber maple. And finally, if you're looking for a tree with yellow color, the ginkgo has a very nice yellow fall color. Now the reason it's great to select these trees in the fall when they are coloring is because when they're grown from seed, there is variation in the color. So to get that color that you want, you'll want to select them in the fall.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.